Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt something was off? Not in a horror movie kind of way. I mean, real life unease. The kind that crawls under your skin and whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." That's exactly what happened to Jake, a recent grad trying to make it in Austin, Texas. Cheap rent, old building, downtown vibes. It sounded perfect. But what he found wasn't just a fixer-upper apartment. It was a secret buried in drywall and silence. This isn't just a Reddit creepypasta. It's a slow-burn descent into obsession, paranoia, and something far darker. And the wildest part? The story is so detailed, so raw, that thousands debated whether it was fiction or a real-life cry for help. It started with a Reddit post. You know the kind. A late-night scroll through RR no sleep, maybe some popcorn in hand, the soft hum of your AC unit masking the world outside. A user with a throwaway account drops a story with the title, "I found a door in my apartment that isn't supposed to exist." It gets a few upvotes at first, then it explodes. Within hours, the comment section's on fire. People are drawing floor plans, swapping urban legends, pulling property records from the city's database like Reddit has become CSI, Austin. And through it all, Jake keeps posting, piece by piece, like breadcrumbs in a forest of shadows. What kept everyone hooked wasn't just the mystery. It was the emotion behind it. The uncertainty. The voice of someone teetering between logic and fear, who wasn't asking for fame or karma. He just needed someone, anyone, to believe him. And maybe that's what made it so terrifying. Because what if he was telling the truth? If you've ever doubted your own memory, felt the walls close in, or heard something in the dark you couldn't explain, then Jake's story will hit you like a freight train. And here's the thing. What he discovered wasn't just another room. It was a secret the city had forgotten. One that wanted to stay buried. But what happens when you don't stop digging? Stay with me. Because what Jake found behind that hidden door changes everything. So, what exactly was Jake walking into? Let's rewind a bit. Because to understand how this Reddit story exploded, you need to understand the world it entered. Jake's post didn't just pop up in a vacuum. It landed right in the heart of No Sleep, a Reddit community where storytelling meets psychological thriller. It's where writers blur reality and fiction so well, you find yourself double-checking the locks before bed. But Jake's tone? It was different. This wasn't just crafted for chills. It felt personal, uneasy. Too raw to be fiction, too strange to be real. In his first post, Jake shared that he'd just moved into a one-bedroom apartment off South Lamar in Austin. Nothing fancy. A bit old, a bit quirky. But hey, that's Austin for you. He even joked about the rent being suspiciously cheap, calling it a lease signed in desperation. But that's when he noticed something weird. There were inconsistencies, tiny ones at first. A hallway that didn't line up with the outer wall. An extra few feet of space that didn't show up on the floor plan. That's when the Reddit detectives kicked in. Users started requesting photos, comparing it to known blueprints of similar buildings. Some even dug into the city's old housing permits. Turns out the complex was built in the late 60s, back when inspection standards were, let's just say, relaxed. The deeper Jake went, the more bizarre the posts became. He described a bookcase that seemed bolted into the wall, like it was hiding something. He shared audio of faint knocking sounds at night. Grainy pictures of what looked like a sealed outline of a door. The upvotes skyrocketed. People weren't just reading, they were invested. And Jake? He wasn't trying to write the next big internet creepypasta. He posted inconsistently. Sometimes anxious, sometimes excited. Always real. His updates felt like dispatches from the edge of a psychological unraveling. That's what hooked people. Not just the mystery, but watching someone mentally wrestle with what was real and what wasn't. And when he finally worked up the courage to pry open the bookcase, that's when everything changed. And just like that, curiosity took the wheel. In Jake's next update, he gave us a deeper glimpse into his life and why he ended up in that strange apartment in the first place. He'd just graduated from UT Austin, majoring in psychology, ironically. But with student loans breathing down his neck and no job in sight, he needed a cheap place to crash fast. Craigslist led him to an oddly affordable unit just outside Zilker Park. The landlord was chill, too chill, and barely asked any questions before handing him the keys. Jake said the place had old bones. Creaky floors, stained ceiling tiles, and cabinets that smelled like mothballs. But to him, it was freedom. His first place on his own. No roommates, no dorm rules, Just him and his future, whatever that looked like. But something felt off. There was this smell, old dust mixed with something metallic. And the layout? Off-kilter. The living room wall didn't match the outside dimensions. The bedroom door was slightly crooked, like it had been rehung one too many times. Jake chalked it up to bad construction, until he dropped a pen near the far wall one night. When he went to retrieve it, he noticed a tiny draft coming from behind the built-in bookshelf. Cold air, in August, in Texas. It wasn't just weird, it was impossible. Jake tried to shake the feeling, but his curiosity wouldn't let up. Every night that draft whispered at him, like the apartment itself was begging to be understood. So he did what any logical, degree-holding Texan would do. He grabbed a flashlight, a screwdriver, and posted on Reddit asking if anyone had ever removed a fixed bookcase before. Classic Jake. Within hours, Reddit sleuths were in his comments, tossing out theories. Secret bootlegging tunnel? Panic room? Illegal landlord tricks? One user even joked it was probably a passage to the Upside Down. Jake laughed at first, but as the posts gained traction and more people started DMing him privately, sharing their own apartment horror stories, he realized this wasn't just his mystery anymore. It had become ours. And so, that night, he finally unscrewed the first bolt and stared at a door that wasn't supposed to exist. And there it was, tucked behind layers of drywall, cheap plywood, and decades of silence. A door. Not just any door. Jake said it looked like something out of a 1940s bunker. Solid wood, rusted hinges, no handle on his side. Which, let's be honest, is never a good sign. At first he hesitated. Every horror movie he'd ever watched flashed through his brain like a warning siren. But something about the way the cold air seeped through the cracks, like the room itself was breathing, made turning back impossible. He used a flathead to pry it open. It groaned like it hadn't been touched in decades. And what was behind it? A narrow hallway. No light. No sound. Just darkness that seemed to swallow the beam from his flashlight. Now, let's pause a second. Because if you're watching this thinking, dude, why didn't he call the cops? Well, he did, but they shrugged it off. Said the apartment was private property, and if it wasn't a structural hazard, it wasn't their concern. Classic. So Jake took matters into his own hands. He followed the hallway, step by cautious step, until he found it. The secret room. And it was surreal. Dust, thick as cake flour, covered every surface. A wooden desk with yellowed papers. An old rotary phone, disconnected but still humming faintly when he held it to his ear. A calendar on the wall frozen in 1989. And in the corner, a rocking chair. Still gently swaying. No footprints. No signs of recent entry. It was like someone had vanished mid-sentence and the room had been holding its breath ever since. Jake documented everything. Snapped photos, made a TikTok, and posted an update on Reddit. Instantly, it blew up. People theorized everything from government cover-ups to time loops. But the most unsettling part? A few users claimed they'd seen that exact room before. In dreams. And while that could have been trolling, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stepped into something older than he understood. Something that had been waiting. As he closed the door behind him, locking the mystery back where it came from, he whispered the same thing dozens of Reddit users were now typing in his comments. What the hell did I just find? But here's where things go from eerie to downright disturbing. The more time Jake spent in the hidden room, the more it felt wrong. Not bad plumbing wrong, existential wrong. Like the air had weight, like the silence was listening. At first, he chalked it up to paranoia. The kind of nerves you get when you're somewhere you're not supposed to be. But then he noticed the details. Details that didn't add up. There was a family photo on the desk, faded and warped by time. But when Jake picked it up, he swore the faces were blurry. Not out of focus, more like scratched out, except there were no actual marks on the photo, just absence. He found receipts dated years before the building was supposedly constructed. Notes written in perfect cursive. Some signed only with a red ink X. One message, half erased, read, "Don't let the room know you're here." And then there was the mirror. It hung crooked on the far wall, dusty and cracked. But when Jake wiped it clean, his reflection didn't move the same way he did. A half-second delay. Just enough to freeze his blood. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, told himself it was a trick of the light. But deep down, he knew this room didn't follow normal rules. Still, Jake kept coming back. every night, drawn to it like a moth to flame. He journaled his findings, compared notes with Reddit users who swore they'd experienced similar phenomena. A few even DM'd him, claiming to have escaped rooms like this, and urging him to burn it all. But Jake wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. Then the dreams started. They weren't nightmares exactly. More like fragments, whispers, visions of someone sitting in the rocking chair, of the calendar pages turning on their own, of that damn mirror cracking from the inside. He tried sleeping in a different room. Didn't help. He unplugged all his devices. Still woke up at 3:33 a.m. every night, drenched in sweat. And just when Jake thought he'd reached his limit, he made one final discovery. Hidden behind a false panel in the wall was an old leather-bound journal. One that didn't just document what had happened in that room, but predicted everything he was experiencing now. That's when he realized this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And just like that, the journal changed everything. It wasn't just a collection of eerie entries, it was a map, a psychological blueprint, charting a descent into madness that mirrored Jake's every thought. And once he opened that journal, the room responded. It started small, harmless even. Jake would set down his phone, only to find it buzzing in a completely different spot minutes later. Lights flickered even after he replaced the bulbs. A draft whispered through the apartment even though all the windows were sealed shut. Then came the noises. Footsteps. Always at the same time. 2:13 a.m. Sharp. Measured. Like someone pacing in the hidden room. Jake recorded the sounds, played them back. But on playback? Silence. He installed motion sensors. Nothing. But that didn't stop the feeling. That sense that something was watching him, studying him, waiting. His friends thought he was losing it. "You've been doom-scrolling too much Reddit, man," his coworker joked over beers. "You need sleep." But Jake couldn't sleep. Not with the mirror shifting behind him. Not with the photo on the desk changing every few days. Faces reappearing, then vanishing. And always that one phrase scrawled into the margins of the journal. "Don't think about it, or it will think about you." One night, Jake tried testing the room. He set up a GoPro to record overnight. Locked the hidden door. Slept on the couch. The next morning, the footage showed 6 hours of static. And when he checked the timestamp, 2:13 to 2:19 a.m. Just missing. He confronted the landlord. "I don't know what you're talking about," the old man said too quickly. "There's no extra room." "But it's there," Jake replied. "I've been inside." The landlord paused, then whispered, "You shouldn't have gone in." Jake's heart sank. Now things were escalating. He'd hear whispering from the vents. His phone alarm would go off at 3:33 a.m., even when he hadn't set one. The journal started writing back. New pages, fresh ink. But Jake hadn't touched it. Reality was breaking. Jake wasn't sure what was worse, the idea that he was hallucinating all of it, or the possibility that he wasn't. And just as he was about to pack up and run, a neighbor slipped him a note. 3 words, shaky handwriting. "You're not alone." That note, "You're not alone," rattled Jake harder than the whispers, the flickering lights, even the journal. It meant someone else knew. He knocked on every door in the building. Most tenants gave him polite shrugs or nervous glances. But apartment 3B, that's where he met Helen. She was in her late 60s, wore a faded UT Austin sweatshirt, and had eyes that had seen too much. She let him in without asking questions. "I used to live in your unit," she said, pouring black coffee with trembling hands. "Back when they still called it the Arlington Arms, before they renovated it." Jake asked about the hidden room. Helen nodded. It wasn't always hidden. It used to be part of the floor plan. Then one tenant went missing. No body, no note, just gone. After that, they sealed it up. She pulled out a yellowing newspaper clipping from a drawer. "Local artist disappears without a trace. Room left untouched." That artist's name? Marcus Tillman. The same name scrawled inside the journal. Jake hit the archives next. The downtown Austin Public Library, floor 3. City planning files. He scanned blueprints, permits, historical records. The building's floor plan had changed, multiple times. But every time, the same anomaly. Room 217. Always labeled utility storage, yet unaccounted for in electrical and water schematics. It didn't exist. But somehow, it was still there. Jake dug deeper. Police reports, noise complaints, tenants filing for early lease termination. All from Unit 211 or directly above or below it, one report stood out. Subject claims hearing voices from inside walls. Requested priest, not police. Filed by Helen. He returned home that night to find the journal open. A new page. The handwriting wasn't his. Keep digging. It hates that. Now it was clear. He wasn't imagining any of it. Something had been lurking in that room for years, maybe decades, and someone or something was watching everyone who dared get close. Jake wasn't just a tenant anymore. He was a target. But he had questions. He needed answers. And if no one else was going to find them, he'd step back into the room himself. What he didn't know? That room wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a mirror, and it reflected more than just secrets. Jake had made his decision. If no one else was brave, or foolish, enough to enter that room again, it would have to be him. He waited until midnight. The building was quiet, too quiet. With his phone flashlight in one hand and the journal tucked under his arm, he pulled the bookshelf aside and opened the hidden door. The air inside was ice cold. Not just cold. Wrong. The kind of chill that didn't touch your skin but crawled straight into your bones. As he stepped in, something shifted. The room felt aware. Not haunted, aware. Everything looked the same. The untouched furniture, the cracked mirror, the painting of the faceless man. But tonight, the silence screamed. Jake sat on the edge of the dusty bed and opened the journal. As he flipped to a new page, the door slammed shut behind him. Hard. His flashlight flickered. Then failed. Complete darkness, and then... breathing. Not his. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the far corner of the room. Jake froze. His heart was pounding so loudly it could have been mistaken for footsteps. Then came the whisper. Raspy. Inhuman. You're here because you belong. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Who are you? No reply. Just laughter. Low, mocking inside his head. The walls began to close in. Visually. Emotionally. They weren't moving, but he felt crushed. Like the room itself was sinking into him. Memories flooded his mind. Not his own. Visions of other tenants, crying, screaming, begging to leave. But they never did. Jake dropped the journal. The floor rippled. Literally. Like water disturbed by a pebble. A voice roared, "Get!" Jake screamed back, "I don't belong here!" And just like that, the lights came on. Everything was normal. The mirror was whole. The door was wide open. Even the air smelled clean. Jake stumbled out, shaking, heart still racing. When he looked back, the room seemed smaller, quieter, as if it had gotten what it wanted. Or maybe it let him go. That night, he didn't sleep. He couldn't. The room had shown him something. Something inside himself. Fear, yes, but also defiance. And a need for answers. Jake now understood one thing. The room wasn't just haunted. It was feeding. And it had just tasted him. Jake didn't return to the room for days. But the memory stayed with him. Haunting. Unfinished. And when something won't leave your mind, it usually means the story isn't over. Determined to close the loop, Jake dove deeper. He retraced every thread the journal had left behind, every cryptic symbol, every name etched in the margins. One particular entry stood out. It mentioned a man named Thomas Wren, the building's first maintenance supervisor back in the 1960s. Jake tracked him down through old city records. To his shock, Thomas was still alive, retired and living just outside Houston. The old man answered the door with shaky hands and tired eyes. But when Jake mentioned the apartment number, Thomas went pale. "I told them to brick it up," he whispered. "I told him not to rent that place out again." Jake leaned in. "Why? What's in that room?" Thomas sighed. "It started when I was young. I found the original blueprints. That room, it wasn't meant to be there. The foundation didn't support it. It was added later. Illegally. Quietly. No permits, no records." Jake pulled out the journal. Thomas's eyes widened. "You found it?" He flipped to the back page and pointed at a strange symbol. This was his mark. The man who built that room. He wasn't just a contractor. He was into dark things, occult rituals. Claimed he could trap emotional energy, fear, grief, trauma, and feed off it. Jake felt his stomach twist. Thomas continued. "Every tenant who stayed too long, changed. Some vanished. Some ended up in psych wards. One woman even... He stopped, voice cracking. Jake didn't need to hear the rest. Back in Austin, Jake gathered his things. One last visit to the room, one last chance to see it for what it was. Armed with a UV light and a digital recorder, he returned. And this time he saw everything. Symbols carved into the floorboards, layers of hidden messages under the paint, audio distortions, whispers only picked up by the recorder. It was real, all of it. He recorded everything, documented the evidence. Then, with the journal in hand, he made his choice. He left the room, locked the door, and sealed the bookshelf for good. He wasn't running anymore. He was ending it. As Jake sealed the door for the last time, he didn't feel fear. Just stillness, like a storm had passed, and all that remained was the sound of silence and clarity. He packed up the few belongings he had and gave his landlord notice. No dramatic confrontation, no angry exit, just a quiet departure, like he was leaving a place that never truly wanted him. Downtown Austin buzzed with its usual chaos. Tourists snapping selfies, musicians busking on corners. But for Jake, everything moved in slow motion. He wasn't the same man who'd moved in just months ago, wide-eyed and hopeful. Now, he carried the weight of knowing that not all haunted places have ghosts. Some just absorb what we bring in. Fear, trauma, confusion, and reflect it back until we can't tell what's real anymore. He dropped the keys in the landlord's office mailbox and walked away without looking back. Jake didn't speak much for a few days. He stayed with a friend across town, trying to find his footing again. But what helped most wasn't therapy or journaling. It was something unexpected. He posted on Reddit, not for clout, not to go viral, just to tell the truth. He titled the post, "The Room That Wasn't Supposed to Exist," a story from Austin TX. He detailed everything. His discovery, the strange occurrences, the journal, the final decision. But instead of seeking validation, he ended it with a question. Have you ever lived somewhere that felt wrong? The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of users chimed in, not with disbelief, but with their own stories, about rooms that didn't feel right. Houses with unexplainable cold spots, apartments with strange histories. Jake wasn't alone, and that changed everything. He decided not to chase closure in the traditional sense. There was no villain to arrest, no curse to lift, no grand reveal, just a room that should never have been there, and a man who chose to walk away. And sometimes, that's enough. But this wasn't the end of Jake's story, not by a long shot. Because what came next wasn't about survival, it was about reclaiming control, finding purpose in what he'd experienced. And that journey was just beginning. What started as one man's silent descent into an impossible room became something much bigger. Jake's Reddit post didn't just spark curiosity, it ignited a wildfire of connection. As the thread grew, so did the theories. Some believed the room was a government cover-up. Others were convinced it was a residual echo of past trauma, like emotional energy trapped in drywall and silence. And then, there were those who simply said, "I've been there too." Comment after comment rolled in, stories of strange noises in attics, of houses that felt heavy, of places that seemed to breathe when no one was home. What made Jake's story resonate wasn't just the mystery, it was the emotion, the honesty, the psychological toll that so many had felt but never spoken aloud. And let's be real, Reddit loves a good mystery, but it loves authenticity even more. One user created fan art of the hidden room, complete with a flickering light bulb and dust particles suspended midair. Another wrote a poem inspired by Jake's story, calling the room a memory trap disguised as four walls. A few skeptics showed up, as they always do, challenging Jake's credibility. But they were drowned out by a chorus of people who didn't care if the story was fact or fiction. Because what mattered wasn't whether it happened exactly that way. It was that it could have. And that could have is what made people stay. In a world overflowing with surface-level content, Jake's experience scratched deeper. It forced people to pause, to reflect, and to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Not just what's behind that door, but what am I hiding behind mine? The comments weren't just engagement. They were confessions, echoes, a shared pulse among strangers who understood something unspoken. And now it's your turn, because you've made it this far. You've walked with Jake through every twist, every shadow, every breathless moment in that hidden room. But what if your story is next? What if you've experienced something you haven't found the words for yet? We're building more than a channel here. We're building a community. A space where stories like this matter, where they're heard. And that brings us to one final moment. Because what comes next? That's up to you. Jake's story didn't just end when he shut that door, it exploded across Reddit like wildfire. Within hours of being posted, the thread on No Sleep lit up. Hundreds of comments flooded in, some praising his bravery, others dissecting every line like a true crime case. One user even claimed they found a real apartment in downtown Austin with a layout eerily similar. Theories popped up everywhere. Was the room a ghost trap? A psychological experiment? A relic from a forgotten tenant who never left? One user even drew a digital floor plan based on Jake's descriptions. Another turned the whole saga into a chilling comic strip that racked up thousands of upvotes. But it wasn't just speculation. Some shared stories of their own. Hidden crawl spaces, rooms that felt wrong, and memories they couldn't explain. It was like Jake's post opened a door for everyone. So what do you think? Could this story have been real? Or was it an elaborate fiction meant to mess with our heads? Drop your theory below, and if you've ever had a strange experience with a room, a house, or even just a gut feeling, this is the space to share it. Let's unravel the unknown together.